Welcome to the Gruber Morning Show. This is the special Tesla Roadster podcast. I'm Pete Gruber,
I'm Mark Schaffner. Good morning and Merry early Christmas.
and we have Mike Manning, our shop manager, with us today, who specializes in the alignment issues we're going to talk about today. We were going to do that 2 weeks ago, or last week actually, and it didn't pan out. But we're here today. We're going to cover it, and got a few items to get through before we get there. Again, thank you for joining us. Hope you're having a wonderful holiday period for the next week or so. We were contacted by one of our customers, and he says, Pete, I'm happy to report that the red Roadster VIN 1230 has been sold. I've got a picture of it here. This was a beautiful Roadster. And he says, thank you for posting the ad on your website. He's talking about the Roadster Matchmaking site, and this was in Fairfax, Virginia. He sold it to someone who contacted me, or who he was contacted through our site. And he says, while it's bittersweet, it's to no longer be a Roadster owner, I still have my Model 3 and look forward to owning Teslas for a long time to come. Thank you for all you do in the Roadster community. So again, for those of you that are thinking about selling a Roadster, we can handle that for you. It's completely free of charge, and the listings run until sold, so you don't have any deadlines, and like with auctions where you only get 7 days or so.
And while we don't know for sure if they got full asking price on it, the sellers don't typically disclose for us what prices that they get. We know that oftentimes it's in the neighborhood of what has been listed. So, bring a trailer, eat your heart out.
And by the way, speaking of bring a trailer, we find that plagiarizing and emulating is not a bad thing. They have some great ideas on their site. Our matchmaking site is evolving. We now have a graph out there under the sold section, so you can actually see the sold cars, the valuation, and so feel free to check that out on our website. It's under the Roadsters for Sale button at the top. Have another item here. This is from Eric Robertson in Texas. He says, I received this charge port cover from Chris Orndorff, who is the designer and the innovator that created this. He says, I received this earlier this week, and I wish this existed years ago. Let me show you a picture of what we're talking about here. And I'm going to go to our website. It is out on our e-store now. It's available for sale. And this little device is kind of cool in that, can we bring that up, Jesse? Yeah, there we go. This will actually cover the Roadster socket, the Type 1 socket, they called it.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're going through car washes or you're out in the rain, typically this does not become a problem, but it can anytime you get water around voltage. So where the majority of problems occur with this socket or with this charge port opening is the lower light ring there. There's a seam there and a circuit board underneath it with a connector. And what happens over time is water can migrate into that connector housing. And whenever you have water with etches, circuit board etches, and voltages flowing, you get what's called electrolysis. And you end up etching or eating away metal. And when your light ring stops responding, or the colors are wrong, or certain colors aren't working, that's what's happening. This little cap will prevent some of that, and that it will also keep the water off of the socket. So this is available on our website currently, and it's only $25. There you go. Skill level to install it is beginner, very easy. It just pops on there. And we're going to be recommending this to the owners that have had problems with their charge ports or have them rebuilt. Again, like the ad here says, we have innovators in the Roadster community that are sharing their expertise and continuing to develop aftermarket product for the Roadster.
Mm-hmm.
So this is now available. You can buy this from either Chris or you can buy it from our website. The price is the same, and we have plenty in stock for you to buy. All right, have another image here, and this one came from Michael Aldia, one of the old Tesla battery engineers, and this is an image from 2008. There, of course, is a Tesla Roadster behind them there, and if you look to the right, up a little bit toward the middle, you'll see that Elon is in that image.
I do. Not looking very happy, by the way.
No, he probably just found out that the Roadster was being sold under cost. I would imagine, but or he was preoccupied, but he's right there in amongst that crew. And so Michael says that there are about 3 to 4 people still with Tesla that are in this image. I want to thank Michael for sharing these kinds of nostalgic images with the community, and we'll talk about them in the podcast as they become available. He says this is the entire battery engineering group, February of 2008. It was a delivery day for P1 to the chair of the board at that time, Elon. And that would be that would be VIN number 1, founders number 1.
Yep.
He is in the photo if you look hard enough. And again, there are 3 or 4 that are still with the company. Another item here to cover before we get into the alignment issues. There is a customer here locally that is having problems with his console display. And he says, I think my odometer display has gone kaput. Car's in storage, can't get it out right now, but wondering what's going on and what it's going to take to fix it. Has anyone else run into this? What we find typically is that when you lose functionality inside the cabin, it's not necessarily that device going defective. We're finding rodent damage is usually the culprit. And what happens is the rodents are looking for something to eat or build nests with. And when they hit the wiring harnesses, some of them are soy-based insulation, which apparently is edible to rodents. And they don't always stop by chewing off the insulation. They oftentimes will chew through the copper wire. Or if they do chew the insulation, like you found, it will then short the copper wire to a chassis. Wasn't that one that you had just worked on?
Yes, we had one just like that.
So, this could be rodent activity. So what we recommended, he's a local customer. Bring it by. We'll take a look at it, and we'll see if it truly is just the console display or whether you've got rodent damage. The remediation for that is we've done this to a couple of cars now. You can buy on Amazon an ultrasonic transmitter that emits a sound that the rodents don't like. And it's kind of like a dog whistle, I guess. We can't hear it. Mm-hmm. But by inserting those in the Roadster in a few strategic places, the rodents will stay away. You won't be able to hear it. It runs off 12 volts. It doesn't affect the battery levels in the Roadster any because they're such small current type devices. But that's one way that you can resolve that. The other one is get yourself a barn cat and don't feed it for a while.
That's right. We have a couple of comments as you're going to the next article. On Instagram, Shilongo415 says happy holidays. So thank you for joining us. And on YouTube, Stephen Rose asks, is there any news on the next-gen Roadster production date?
Well, remember, this is an Elon timetable, and overcommitting and undelivering is probably a harsh message, but you have to consider that what Tesla is going to do is focus on their revenue-generating products, and that's definitely the Cybertruck. That's going to be the semi-truck. And a luxury vehicle, exotic car type, ranking like the second-generation Tesla Roadster is not going to move the needle very much in the way of making shareholders happy.
Yeah, the last update that we have of any significance from Elon was clear back in February when he had announced that, we think we'll have something to announce by the end of 2024. Well, the end of 2024 is upon us.
Now. Yeah, that's right.
And there's nothing been announced yet, so we don't have anything else.
But folks, it's worth the wait. Tesla always comes through eventually, and it'll be an awesome car because they have to keep changing the design characteristics in order to keep up with all the other people trying to make a product like it. I've got another item here. There's an image here we can throw up, Jesse. This is a Tesla Roadster Visium hardtop that's for sale on eBay. And there you have it. It's $4,500 is the asking or best offer, it says. For those of you that like this, they are pretty cool in that it provides the equivalent of a hardcover without covering up the carbon fiber roll bar cover. so you get some carbon fiber visibility. It's great even in summertime here. We've driven a few of those. It lets the light through, but not so much that you're roasting and baking in the hot Arizona sun. Um, and it is lighter than the standard hardtop. So there is one available on eBay for those of you interested. It's coming out of Colorado, I believe. Let's see if I can get that here. Yeah, it says that here somewhere. All right. So getting into the alignment portion of our podcast, we had traditionally outsourced alignment because most smaller shops don't, have that kind of equipment like dynos and alignment machines. But we were able to buy a pretty sophisticated Hunter system, less than a year old, and state of the art, which even had the Roadster code or software in it.
Yep.
So we no longer outsource that, and Mike has been working on dialing in this new piece of equipment, and we've got some updates to share with you about how this thing is functioning with Roadsters.
Yeah, it works pretty well. We had to get a new lift, the 4-post lift that we got for that. Got that up and running rather quickly. We loaded up a few different Roadsters, and we take our 7-Eleven car, and we did a couple of adjustments on it, and then we take it out and drive it and see how it feels. Before we do any alignments, we take the car on a quick spin. We kind of see, is it pulling left, pulling right? How is it doing under braking? To kind of get an idea of where the Roadster currently sits. And then from there, we'll put it up on the rack, and we'll take a look at the suspension bushings, the shocks, everything. It's even the steering rack, make sure the bushings are good, the bolts are tight to hold the end of the car. At that point.
And the difference here then is too, unlike our 2-post lifts, where the suspension now basically hangs.
Yep.
In this scenario, the car is actually sitting on a 4-post lift, and we're able to see its ride height. And
yes. Yep. So when we put it up on there, we can the weight of the vehicle is actually being suspended by the springs on the shock, and so we have ride height sensors, which you have on your screen, that are on the front fender that we apply. Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Can we bring that up, Jesse? It's on my screen. There we go.
Yep. So on top of the front fender there, you can see a sensor. That sensor measures ride height, and that goes across each four fenders. You can see one on the back as well. It takes a measurement between basically the center of the wheel. Once we roll the car forward and backwards on there, we can center the machine and the wheels, so it's pretty accurate. Then it gives us a ride height measurement. So if you get a shocks or aftermarket shocks, you can adjust ride height on them. It's very important because if you have one side that's a little bit lower than the other, the car is going to steer a little bit differently. So it's very important to make sure you get the ride height set correctly. You can corner weight as well, which is very helpful. If you're doing a normal shock setup like what we sell, we recommend making sure that follow the directions that come with it, and then make sure that wherever you take it to get aligned, you have the ride height sensors applied on there to make sure everything is set. Really important issue with doing alignments too is making sure you have proper weight in the vehicle and tire pressures, because tire pressures basically are a footprint that we're trying to adjust with the suspension components. And then on gas-powered vehicles, we typically put half a tank to 3/4 of a tank of gas in the vehicle, because you're not always going to run an empty vehicle or always going to have a full vehicle, and that fluid, the gasoline, actually weighs a lot, so it can change the characteristics of the alignment just as you drive the vehicle. EVs, obviously, we don't have that problem as much, but I like to put some weight in the driver's seat or weight in the passenger seat, and we can do fine adjustments on there. So with our suspension setups, we'll talk to the customers and find out what type of driving they're going to be doing. If it's just running back to the store, stuff like that, then we can put in general specs. Our Hunter alignment it came with the Roadsters preloaded into it, and so we just bring that up. We can scan a barcode, which has the VIN. It will preload on the work order system and the Hunter alignment, and then automatically load up the specs in the system. So at that point, once we get up on the rack and we set up the sensors, we can just immediately go into the car and start making adjustments. And with the Roadsters, we can do a lot. We can do caster adjustments, we can do camber adjustments, and we can adjust toe. Most times, toes out on Roadsters. Um, depending on the roads, you go over a bump or something like that, you can take the toe adjustment and knock it out. Caster is adjusted. That will speed up or slow down steering. So we took Frank out. I had Frank drive a car with the stock caster, and then we made some adjustments, and then you got to feel how the steering changed with just the caster adjustment. And that's basically offsetting the upper control arm with the lower control arm on the front. And so you can speed up or you can slow down the steering with that. Or a good measure, you're driving down the road, you make a turn. When you go to straighten out the car, if you lightly let go of the steering wheel, how fast it corrects back. And that is a good sign of having good caster numbers depending on what tires and wheels you run. And then camber on these cars, we always see like the Model S's, they have all that camber wear from the back wheels.
Yes.
And when we do, the newer vehicles on that, we try and bring those back in. So we take the wear off the inside of the wheel and put it towards more of the middle. The Tesla Roadsters, we can do the same thing. It's just instead of using adjustable eccentrics or the arms that the newer Teslas have, we just replace shims. So there's shim thicknesses that we put in there to either add positive or negative camber. We usually try and for the rear, usually 1.3 is about where we go. That gives you optimum tire wear. And then up front, the specs are 0.5 negative camber up front, so that helps with that. Depending on if you want to go do some track events or like autocross event, we can dial in more negative camber if we want, so that you get better turn in and the car feels more planted around.
Now, we had talked about the various driving styles that our customers are using with their Roadsters. What kind of options are available here if we talk to the owners and we ask them what kind of driving do you do and how stiff, how comfortable do you want it?
So on most Roadsters that are sport models, they have adjustable sway bars. So if you look at the sway bars on the ends, there'll be 3 holes, and we can adjust the stiffness of that sway bar. So the sway bar it's basically when you make a turn, how far the car kind of leans out to the outside edge of the corner. So we can make adjustments there. We have adjustable end links that we can also set up to create a little bit more benefits from the sway bar. And then if we're gonna do a track setup like that, we'd probably go 1.5 to 1.8 negative camber up front and probably 1.5 in the back, which will give us, as you turn in, you get that slight body roll, which gives it more footprint on the tire. And then with our shocks, we have the adjustability to change out springs if you want to go with a stiffer spring rate for the track. Like my Miata, I go up a higher spring rate when I go on the track because it gives you a better footprint with the tire. So we can change springs. We have the dampening adjustments on there, so we can adjust that as well. Tire pressure. Currently, we're 33 in the front and 44 in the rear for tire pressures. That seems to be a good happy medium with our roads here. And then with the dampening adjustments as well. So depending on 25 is the middle range of the 50 clicks. We can go as high as like 3 or 4 on the back, and then depending on if the customer likes a really good turn, in we can soften up the front a little bit so that they get more initial bite when they turn on the vehicle.
I see. Now, with our shocks, the shocks that we have for the Roadsters Intrax, they are adjustable, and how do we usually dial those in for the average driver?
Average driver. So spring sag is dependent on the vehicle, and we can make adjustments with that. Obviously, if you get a brand new pack, it weighs a little bit more, so we increase the spring preload a little bit to compensate for that. And then once we get it set with each corner, we can go in and adjust the dampening. So if a gentleman wants to just drive it down the street to the coffee shop or something like that, you can. So on our dampeners, you screw the dampening all the way up, and that's 0, and then you count back. So on 5 clicks is going to be one of the stiffer settings, and then if you go all the way down to like 45 clicks, it softens it up. So sometimes when you do our test drives, I'll soften up the front, and then sometimes I'll soften up the rear just to kind of see if you give me any driving feedback.
Mm-hmm.
And it's usually when you come back and say the car no longer drives like a dump truck.
Yeah, right. Which is immediately the case when we change out to our shocks, to the replacement shocks.
Yes.
Yep, the shocks and the bushings and the ball joints. The ball joints are really important. The new designs on ball joints are made to be captive, so when the ball joint fails, you don't lose the whole control arm mechanism up into the wheel well. That's on new Toyotas and all the new cars. Because the Tesla Roadster is like a Lotus-based older car, it doesn't have that captive ball joint. So that's why it's important if you drive down the road and you hear the front end making any noises or something like that, get the car in the air, pull the shocks, we lift them up and down, make sure that there's no play, or if there is play, to get them replaced as quickly as possible, because when they do break, that whole wheel and upright assembly will come out into the wheel well, and that'll cause a lot of damage. The front of the car are also nose down.
Mm-hmm. Okay. No, the shocks that we replace the old the OEM shocks with, there's a tool that comes with that too, and we send that to the owners as well, right?
Yeah, so they can adjust the shocks.
Okay. And there's an instruction sheet.
Instruction sheet comes in. It's nice and laminated. If you were kind of rather new at this, it's pretty straightforward reading. The biggest thing is to make sure you have a measuring device, because we want to set the spring preload a certain amount of millimeters. The spring, the way the shocks work is the spring is meant to hold the weight of the vehicle, and then the dampening adjustment or the valving inside the shock is meant to control the oscillations of the spring as it goes down the road. So it's very important to put the springs in a certain amount of tension so they keep the weight of the vehicle up, and then use the dampening to control the oscillations of the.
Okay. I'm sorry, do you have a question?
Well, yeah. What are some of the things that you've learned as you've gone through doing the alignments on the Roadsters?
Management of the weight on the back of the vehicle, because that battery pack weighs a lot. There's completely different settings from the front to the rear of the vehicle, so you can't measure, you can't mirror the front with the back with the same settings, because the car won't like that. It won't respond very well. So being able to independently set the rear and then set the front separate, like most cars, like the Miata's 50-50 weight distribution. So I can almost mirror suspension settings front to rear, and a lot of cars you can kind of do that, but with the Roadster, that heavy battery pack back there, and manual steering, it's very important to have follow the instructions or give us a call so we can kind of walk someone through it to make sure that the rear is set correctly, and the front is set differently and correctly as well.
Very, very interesting.
So we had a Cybertruck on there the other day.
Yep, and it fit.
And it fit. Yeah, that was the first criteria. When we first bought the 4-post lift, they gave us 2 options, and I ended up getting the larger one, thinking, well, that may be important, and it was. When that Cybertruck pulled up on there, it was substantially larger than even our the Arcadias that we have.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a big difference too between the widths between the S models and the Roadsters. The S models are very similar in size compared to the Cybertruck. When we put that up on the lift, I was really surprised at how much bigger they looked, because when we put them on there, we have to do the roll calibrations so that the machine knows where the wheels rest at, so it gets its numbers from there. We picked the right size lifts for sure.
Well, we have some images here, and let me see if I can go through these and see if there may be some questions that arise after we. This particular Roadster, I believe, has already gone back to the owner. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And there's Mike standing next to it. The head unit there actually has lasers inside it. Is that correct?
Yeah, it uses laser beams to bounce back and forth. And when you see the sensors that are mounted on the car, there's different types of the dots on there, and that's how it counts the dots so it knows what position the actual wheel is in, or the fender tag.
I see. Okay. There we got Frank looking at the back. Yeah, there we go. We got a better shot of that head unit. And I guess we were surprised that Roadster was actually one of the items in this computer program.
Yeah, it was surprising to see all Teslas, but the Roadster being in there was a nice find. We also have the ability to go in and do custom specs as well, which works out really well. So if we want to be able to get someone set up for autocross event or something like that, we can do a pre-print printout of what the car's currently at, and then do an after printout so that the customer gets the numbers. And we can even go further and print out more documentation on there as to what we adjusted and how that relates to the vehicle handling.
So I guess the bottom line here is now we can actually dial in your Roadster based on your driving preferences,
Yep.
rather than just middle of the road.
It adds a lot more fun to driving the vehicles when you can kind of dial it in to how you like it.
Right, right, exactly.
On YouTube, Banana Man, Richard Beach has come in and says, Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to y'all. So thanks for joining us, Richard. Glad to have you watching today.
Yeah, yeah. Likewise, Richard. All right, so there we have the entire rack system, and we are.
And I think we want to give another shout out to Ben Pack, the great people there that helped us to get this rack system.
Yep.
They've been a good partner to us, and I'm glad that we were able to get that larger system from them, and as quickly as we did.
Yeah, it showed up really quickly, and the quality is really good on it. It was able to hold that Cybertruck, which is not a light vehicle by any means.
So the computer printouts here and the readouts here, number of screens available now. Are we sending these to the customers now?
Upon request, we can send more. Typically, what I do is I send the before and the after so that they can see the numbers of what we do with the vehicle. We can add documentation like what you have on the screen currently right there. Is the ride heights. So that tells me when we set up our ride heights on the car, those sensors at the fender level are showing me the accuracy of that. So if we need to, we can go in and make adjustments on the car to make sure that the car is flat when it goes down the road.
Mm-hmm. You had also mentioned customers that may want to do modifications to their Roadster, such as different tires and sizes. Maybe you can address that a bit.
Different tires, different wheels. We've looked at doing some 16-inch wheels. That will improve acceleration, a little bit less unsprung weight, so steering will be a little bit better as well.
16's in the rear.
16's in the rear, because
Okay.
Roadsters come 16's front and 17's rear.
Mm-hmm.
And then for a little bit better steering, and depending on how they like to drive, we could do 17's in the front, 17's in the rear. If you do a squared setup like that, it also allows us a little bit different tire availability, because currently with 16's in the front and 17's in the rear, that limits our tire selection down because they got to make both sizes of the. So if we do 17's in the front or 16's all the way around, we can switch to different brands of tires and get different tread wear. So we can get a super sticky tire if someone wants to do that, or we can change the tread wear up to like a 300 or a 400 tread wear, which make the tires last a little bit longer. Just depends on what the customer wants. And also, when you change tires out, you can play with sidewall. Different thicknesses of sidewall construction is also part of a spring rate that also works on the car. That's why when you put like 600, or 60 psi, the car feels really stiff and bouncy because you don't have that spring rate going on the tire. So when you run the tires within a certain range, you get that spring rates working with the shock and with the rest of the suspension, and that's why we came up with the 43 and I think 32 in the front is what works well with our suspensions.
Okay. All right. Well, I think that this portion of the podcast will probably become part of our tutorial process out on our YouTube channel, because we don't usually go this deep into the suspension issues on a Roadster. And if you'd like to see more of this type of thing, certainly let us know what topics you'd like us to dive into. I think we are out of topics for this podcast. And again, we want to wish everybody a very Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays. I'm Pete Gruber.
I'm Mark Schaffner. Thanks for coming, Mike.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.